Arsenal versus Burnley is Monday night, and that will be Arsenal's chance to reply to what happened last night, but also set the agenda going into the final week of the season. Scott, I think we should just talk briefly about the scenario that we now find ourselves in. Do you think there's any chance that Arsenal could have nerves going into that game? Do you think Manchester City believe that they can still snatch it on the final day? Because ultimately, let's be clear, if nerves and anxiety do befall Arsenal against Crystal Palace on the last Sunday of the season, there's every chance that they can steal it still.
Yeah, I mean, look, the biggest thing that City, they'll be kicking themselves for the rest of their lives if they drop points because they're not fully at it or they think they can't do it, and then Arsenal somehow drop points either against Burnley or Crystal Palace. I just feel, I think Arsenal have come through so much mentally this season that yes, of course they will be nervous. They know they're nearly there. It is literally, we talked about the marathon and they've come in and, a couple of games ago, they were level with a lap to go, but now they literally can touch the finishing line. And you've got Burnley at home, Palace away. We've just seen how Palace played and talked about them, and they're going to be days before their European Conference League final. I can't see how Arsenal can drop it from here. I just can't. Burnley look a better side, almost a little bit of the shackles have come off in a way under Michael Jackson, but it's not as if they're going to be any trouble in a way. This is about Arsenal against themselves. And if they can see through it, they've done the hard work. Now they've just got to finish it off. And look, the hardest game out of all the 4 matches remaining is Bournemouth away for City. It's not any of Arsenal's 2 games, so they should see it in from here.
Away at Palace on the final day of the season should be a tougher game than it looks because of the final situation. Palace have got 3 days between that and when they go to Leipzig, and they're not going to play their first 11. If they do play their first 11, it's going to be a situation like last night where he takes everybody off at halftime or just after halftime and prescribed changes, and everybody knows that the focus is elsewhere. So they should. And listen, if you had the chance to win your first title in 22 years and you had to beat Burnley and Crystal Palace to do it, I think you'd back yourself, wouldn't you? You would have thought so anyway. Lots of debate about whether or not this Arsenal side should fit into one of the greatest teams in the Premier League era if they win the Champions League too. Why on earth would you bother having that sort of conversation? Why? They haven't won anything yet. We haven't finished the season. They may well win the Champions League and the Premier League double, but there is no debate to be had. One, if they win this year, which I hope they do, at least the Premier League, they would have done very well to do so. But you can't talk about great sides and great teams until you have won multiple Premier Leagues. You don't become a great team by winning one Premier League title. We had this last year where people were where do Liverpool sit in a pantheon of champions? They're just champions. That's good enough, by the way. If you get to be a champion of the Premier League, you've done a very, very, very good job. The best teams that have played in this competition are Manchester United, probably the treble-winning team, and the circa 2008 team, which was absolutely fantastic. The Chelsea team under Jose Mourinho was absolutely superb, back-to-back titles. And the Manchester City team that won the treble. Right, they're the great teams of the Premier League era. You have to do a lot before you can even be spoken about in the same sentence as those 3. Am I right or am I right?
No, you are right, but obviously the debate for detractors of Arsenal is the style of play. So I think that's where this narrative comes from. Can they really be classed as a great team, or is this just quite an underwhelming Premier League season? I think it's really interesting when you look at the points tally, and it's going to be pretty low for champions. Manchester United are going to finish 3rd, even though they had a clown in charge for the first half of the season. Aston Villa are going to qualify for the Champions League via the Premier League, even though they couldn't win a game in the first few weeks of the season. So there is an argument to say that a lot of the top teams actually are not as good as they were. But I think you counteract that by saying you look at the middle order of the Premier League and, teams like Bournemouth and Brighton and Brentford, Everton even, who ultimately are going to have a decisive say in this title race and maybe the relegation race as well. They're all capable of taking points off those top teams. So I think overall, the Premier League has been much more competitive this year. Leeds and Sunderland have played their part, but I think the teams at the top of the table are a pale imitation of previous incarnations the Arsenal Invincibles, any number of Arsene Wenger's team, actually the team that won the first double, I think is better than this Arsenal team. So I think it is a genuine debate. I think it is a worthwhile debate.
Manchester United won the title in 2001 with 80 points. The league sometimes does become quite congested. It happens like that, Scott, doesn't it? I mean, the fact that they'll probably win it with 85, it's not a mark against their name, I don't think.
No, but I agree with every single word that Crookie has said there. I think that the mid-table clubs have improved and they're really difficult to play against. But I think at the very top end, you only have to go far as back as, Pep City and Klopp's Liverpool in their prime just a few years ago when they're getting 90-odd points. I'm sorry, even these Bournemouths, Brentfords, Evertons, oh my goodness me, I'm seeing Chelsea in ninth, Fulhams and that they would have swished them aside, Klopp's Liverpool and Pep's City in their prime. So for me, the top end, I don't think it has been as good. I don't think it's been good maybe for a couple of seasons. I think that's why City's still rebuilding. Chelsea, we know, are going down a route that hopefully will change. Manchester United have been there for over a decade, out of the picture. And Aston Villa, well done for them for just getting into it. So I think top end, not high quality. I think Arsenal, I've always kind of backed them when people have wanted to criticise them, but they have been lucky with the draw in the Champions League. Well done to them for getting to the final. But they're not the second best team in Europe, in my opinion.
No, but also it's not really a debate, I don't think, to be had after 12 months of being a success. This is an Arsenal team that have been building towards becoming a established contender for top prizes. A couple of years ago, they couldn't even get in the Champions League. So the fact that they've slowly but surely incrementally built and now going to win the title, you don't automatically have a conversation about them being a great team. That happens when they've won 2-3 Premier Leagues. I just don't get this sort of idea to try to slot them into a narrative of where they stand in the pantheon of great champions. It's almost like we've sort of run out of the debate of whether or not they've bottled it or not, so we can't talk about that anymore. So where do we stick them in the big list? The fact is, winning the Premier League is a brilliant achievement, especially in a tough season. I think it has been a tough season. If you speak to any of the managers, at any of the level of the Premier League, they will tell you that they think, especially that middle area, has got much more competitive and lots more people have taken points off people. Arne Slot told me the other day, the days of 90-plus points to win the league are over because the Premier League is so strong. So the fact is they've done a good job. Well done. Pat them on the back. Let's talk about greats in 2 years' time when they've won another Champions League or when they've won back-to-back Premier Leagues.
But Sam, that's the world we live in. The world we live in now are always looking for the extreme highs or the extreme lows. And I do think that...
Stay level.
Exactly.
Stay level, Scott. Stay level.
Stay chilled. But I do think there has been an agenda by some to try and criticise Arsenal whenever they possibly can. And as much as I've sort of said what I've said about Arsenal, you wouldn't put them in one of the top teams in Europe for me, even in the Premier League. But this still could be Arsenal's greatest ever season.
Yeah, and absolutely. And so they should celebrate it if it is, and good luck to them. And do you know what? I hope that they do it because I think they've had a lot of detractors. They've had to put up with a lot of noise. Mikel Arteta, I know Crook doesn't believe me, but he is a genuinely nice bloke. He's actually all right. And I think if he does it, again, I love this narrative of the fact that they gave him the keys to the castle and went, go on then, sort it out. And he has. So, I think that deserves a little bit of applause as well.